Thank you all for coming. You can all see our names. I'm Murph Sheldon, the chair of the Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals. The first thing I'm going to do is, pardon me? Oh, that's right. I have one over. Hi, can you hear me now? Yes. Louder. Louder? I've been told you have to have this right in your mouth to be able to be heard. So we're going to open the meeting and just do a little business, approve the minutes, and then we're going to go and have the applicants and the representatives speak, and then we're going to close the public meeting, and then we will publicly discuss and deliberate decisions in the matter. So that's how it's important. So there is no more public comment will be asked for. Just the people that are involved in the case have been asked to be given 3 minutes to each make a statement beforehand. So we're ready to go ahead. I need a motion to open the public part of the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's open. First thing we're going to do is consider the minutes. Who will open the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 29th minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now I need a motion to open and continue the public meeting for the hearing of the appeal that's been placed before us.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Linda Herbona? Yeah. And you vote? My name. So Linda?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Pete?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Aye. So in the same order we did. Okay. So I believe the order was the attorney, and then the Bazukas, and then Gay Nicholson. Is that correct? What we did last time.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
Hi again, my name is Michael Frank. I represent Lisa Ruzica and Tim Farrell. Mr. Chairperson and members of the Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals. There's little I can say at this point that has not already been said. The arguments have been made, and all that remains is deliberation and a decision. So I want to take this time to thank you for considering the appeal of Lisa and Tim and giving this issue the seriousness it deserves. Each party involved must acknowledge that the decision now before you is not an easy one to make. However, you are a member of the ZBA for a reason. That reason being that you care about your community, you care about the town of Lansing. Likewise, Tim and Lisa, as well as the others involved in supporting this appeal, care about the town in which they live. They care about those who will come after them, and they care about the world that they will someday leave behind. It is our belief that no one person or organization should be above the law. Finally, we encourage you to make a decision tonight that maintains the first enumerated purpose of the Town of Lansing Land Use Ordinance. That being a decision that promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. I leave you tonight with a quote from author Wilford A. Peterson. In speaking about making difficult choices, Mr. Peterson said, "Decision is the spark that ignites action. Until a decision is made, nothing happens. Decision is the courageous facing of issues, knowing that if they are not faced, problems will remain forever unanswered." Again, thank you for your consideration of this appeal on behalf of Tim and Lisa.
Thank you very much.
Would you like my statement? Or?
Yes, please.
evening. I'm Lisa Rosita. I would like to address the February 12th, 2019 supplemental response to the ZBA by the Rod and Gun Club's attorney, Mr. Leha. I first would like to comment on Exhibit B. This exhibit references Karen Edelstein's map drawn on December 8th, 2018 as part of our appeal attachments. Mr. Buell states, quote, "They also show the northern neighbor's propane tank being on their property, when in fact it is not," end quote. The RGC had their property surveyed in early spring 2018. The RGC, once we saw the property lines, we realized that our propane tank was on Rod and Gun Club property. As such, we moved it no more than a month later onto our property. So in fact, Mr. Buell's map is incorrect in that regard. Now this is simply a location of a structure, a tank. This isn't mapping of wetlands or floodwaters. So this leaves room to wonder what else is inaccurate with his mapping. Secondly, Mr. Leha's letter states, quote, "With the project's physical work largely completed, appellant's last-minute efforts to complicate the process with claims that are irrelevant and outside the ZBA jurisdiction are highly prejudicial to the club." To be clear, we did not drag our feet in an attempt to injure the RGC. Our appeal was no easy task and took the efforts of many people and much time. Furthermore, it was submitted within the allotted time set forth in town law. When the appeal was filed, furthermore, the CEO warned the RGC there would likely be an appeal. When the appeal was filed, he notified them in writing that if the ZBA did not vote in their favor, they would need to remove the work they had done. It was their decision to continue construction. In fact, they picked up the pace, sometimes working after dark, perhaps to curry sympathy if the work they had done would need to be reversed. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you leave us a copy of your statement?
Hello, my name's Tim Farrell and I live at 101 Salmon Creek Road. I'd just like to address the claim of Scott Hicks that the RGC exhausted review of all other alternatives before they decided to move their track range. I wonder if one of the several remedies that were discussed at length and dismissed as not being viable options was alternative shock compounds such as bismuth. Way back in March of 2018, at a meeting of the planning board, steel shot was discussed and dismissed as being harmful to gun barrels and also too expensive. It was also stated that the sanctioning body would not sanction any shoots not using lead. Well, according to the Amateur Trap Shooting Association sanctioning rules, the use of lead, steel, bismuth, or other composite non-toxic shot materials shall be allowed. It appears that the RGC is married to lead because it's the cheapest shot available. Their willingness to continue to put tons of lead into the environment every year in order to save a buck on their hobby is selfish and irresponsible. We all pay more for gas, paint, and other products we use every day because the lead has had to be removed. It's time for the RGC to come before the planning board with a site plan and justify their refusal to join the unleaded party.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Nichols?
I don't have any further comments to add beyond what I submitted last Tuesday, unless I can help in terms of what Karen submitted on the maps.
Well, when we're deliberating, we might have some questions. Mr. Day, you're all set? Okay. Mr. Leahy?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I have no prepared statement tonight, nor do I have any new materials to offer for your consideration. I would simply like to thank the board for your careful consideration of the comments you've heard, and especially the written materials you've received, and we look forward to your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll be closing the public portion of the meeting, and I'm going to open a closed meeting, but not closed to the public, when we'll start trying to figure these things out. So first, I need a motion to close this public part of the meeting.
I make a motion to close the public part of the meeting.
Second.
Maureen,
Yes, Maureen and Judy?
okay. Linda,
Aye.
Maureen, Pete,
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Aye. Now I need a motion to open the closed portion of the meeting so that we can deliberate on these decisions.
And again, if I may, by closed, the deliberations are being held in public. The public is allowed to listen in, and they, in fact, will be here at the opportunity to listen in to the deliberations.
I so move.
Linda,
Second.
Judy seconds. Linda,
Aye. Aye.
Pete,
Aye.
Aye.
aye. So just one public announcement, there's a little procedural thing which, so the hearing, our deliberations are being held under what's called de novo, which means of new. So we're going to be reviewing all the information from all of the parties and making our own decision. We may consider the zoning officer's decisions, but the decisions is ours alone. So if we affirm his decisions, it's our decision. And if we disaffirm his decisions, it's our decision alone. So there's no reflection of the code officer at all, whatever our decisions are.
So did the board want to proceed perhaps by walking through the appellant's original application?
Yes.
And papers where they raised a number of points that they objected to in regards to the code enforcement officer's decisions?
So what we found was in the appeal that the points made were items 3 through 6. So we're going to start debating how these sit. And if there's someone in the audience that we feel can help enlighten us, we'll ask you. But it's up to us to talk to you, not the other way around. So thank you. So the first article 3, the town of Lansing CEO Linda's determination fails to follow lawful procedures as outlined in the town of Lansing Local Law 1-2015, Article 10. And this is the local zoning law of 2015 that was updated from, I believe, 2008. So local law 1-2015, Article 10, 1001.0 continuance.
No, it's not necessary. I remember if all the board members have read them.
Everybody have a copy? Would you like to read out the things that we're thinking about? Maybe the next way.
That would help get everybody on the same
Okay.
page.
So the first question is one of continuance, local law 1-2015, Article 10. And whether or not the decisions that were made would meet the standards for continuance. The town law is, except as, I should read the law, not someone else's interpretation of it. Except as otherwise provided in this Article 10, the lawful non-conforming use of any land, building, or lot existing at the date of adoption or amendment of this ordinance may be continued even though such use, building, or lot does not conform to the regulations specified for the zoning district in which such land, building, or lot is located, unless set forth to the contrary elsewhere in this ordinance. And then, paragraph 1000.1, 1001.1, the non-conforming use of land may not be expanded or extended so as to occupy a greater area of land unless a variance therefore has been granted. And I believe that that's the point that they're asking us to consider.
So I have a question regarding this, and maybe somebody from the gun club can answer it. Can I get up and
Yeah.
point from that? On a pointer? You got a laser pointer? Well, I'll just. Yeah, I need it. I'll stand in front of me. The existing rifle range where the trap areas are going is right here. And this was all tree around it, and those trees have been taken down, right? What happened in these areas before the work? I know the rifle range was in use. What was
Rifle and pistol range was in that area.
so this long skinny thing, here's the rifle range, and that's pistol?
Yes.
What happened in the areas shown as treed with these cloud lines around it?
Other than sporting events for like bowl club, that was it.
What would they do in there?
Shoot target, I mean, it's like 3D target shooting.
I see. So targets would be set up within the trees and,
Trails, yeah.
okay. Thank you. case anybody needs it. Thank you. I guess I can follow up on it. Nobody else wants to. It appears to me that all of the land that is being used under the new plan was being used under the old plan and under the old configuration, the previous plan. The zoning code doesn't differentiate between types of shooting. So it just says sportsman's club with shooting, I'm paraphrasing that. But it doesn't say trap shooting versus rifle shooting versus pistol shooting versus bows and arrows. So it appears to me that Lynn was correct in his interpretation of this piece of the code, 1001.1. And I'm throwing that out there.
I would agree with you.
I would too, that this is the same use that it's been, the same non-conforming use that it has been, in the same general area.
In the, under town action, Lynn does refer though to proposed new use of lands and new trap lead shot shooting ranges. He uses the word new here. And that throws me off a bit because we're talking about something that has already been used. So I'm not totally in agreement with the situation.
Well, I guess the interpretation is, Lynn trying to find the paragraph where he used the word new versus continued
Town
use
action.
under town action.
In which document?
Under 3,
In the appellant's
the one that we're referring to right now.
Okay.
3, and where it says town action. It says CEO Lynn Day states that the LRGC's proposed new use of lands for new trap lead shot shooting ranges.
That part's not in quotes. Is that what it actually says, Lynn?
I'm trying to figure out where you're looking.
Your letter
Page
of
4.
October 12th, your letter.
Well, it's actually
This is their
it's
paraphrasing his letter, so it'd be nice to know the exact
Right,
language.
that's what I was
okay.
My what letter?
Your letter of October 12th, your determination letter of October 12th.
But it goes on to say that the club is not proposing to expand and enlarge or replace anything. Their proposal is to use a smaller footprint than what they are using now. Etc. And that's attachment C.
If you have the Lynn's ZBA memorandum, he has the October 12th letter attached to that as Exhibit C. So you can see, I would recommend that, when you refer directly to Lynn's letter in terms of what verbiage or words that Lynn may have used.
So who is referring to the new? Where's that
Yeah.
number from?
This is the appellant's.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I don't know where in the letter this is taken.
Well, it's 101, 1001.1 is the area that they're speaking of, and then about this determination of October 12th. I don't see the word new.
that was used by the appellant.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
The only place that I remember using new would be under 1001, where I said historically these uses are not new. Shooting locations have been used in the same type of shooting. That's not my letter, that was what I handed in at the first meeting.
I mean, I guess aside from that, Maureen, they are new. You're just replacing some that they're like not using it.
But it is a new area and a new use at that area. All those same.
Under the zoning version.
Right. Okay.
The
I mean,
trap
one could
shooting.
say it's an area new to trap shooting.
Right.
But trap shooting isn't new to that piece of property.
Right.
Right, and it doesn't, the code doesn't identify the type of use.
Right.
So I see it as the continuation of the same use.
Yeah, if we're looking at it as a generic use of shooting, yes.
Yes.
No, I'm just making sure that in the sense of continuance, building a new building, continue the same thing, as long as the building fits the proper setbacks. It doesn't need a special permit, it just be built with a building. So in the appeal, they use the word proposed new and different non-conforming use must be addressed in the plans of town law. So I'm not saying that it's new under town law.
Or different.
Or different. So under 1001, 1001.1, non-conforming use of land may not be expanded or extended so as to occupy an area of land unless, a greater area of land unless a variance therefore has been granted. But we're saying that it's not a greater area of land, that they have been shooting in that land. It's just a different type of shooting which is not delineated in the town law. I I'm a little stuck on new buildings, because I don't see, I know that the interpreted one way, they asked for a building permit for a use, non-conforming use, which was legal, but I don't see where it's okay to build new buildings in non-conforming use. And,
Are you on 1001.2 or?
well, I was looking at 1001, because I read 1001, 1001.1, and I don't see where you can put a new building on a non-conforming lot. And maybe that by omission that makes it okay. The footprint of a non-conforming building may be enlarged, extended, or increased if the lot area, width, and yard settlements set forth in Schedule 2 could be met, or an area variance has been granted. So it's clear that the new building's footprint meets the lot area, width, and yard requirements set forth in Schedule 2. So
Are you asking, can they put new buildings, totally new building?
right. I don't think there's a clear direction one way or the other in the law that I can read.
Well, Herb, if we step back to 101.1, the expansion, where we're just talking about the non-conforming use of land may not be expanded or extended so as to occupy a greater area of land unless a variance has been granted.
Right, and that they haven't done.
That's about the use, but we're talking about a building.
Right. So I just, since we're here, I'm asking that question. Is it okay to build a new building
On that site.
It doesn't say it isn't.
I guess that's similar to what we went over in the last meeting. If if you go down the code 1001.2 and or 1001.2 and 1002.0 address buildings on the property. And I had a question of that 1001.2 doesn't include a new building in the language, but 1002 seemed to, with permission of the ZBA.
Right, which made upon written request, but that wasn't done.
Right.
So. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of section 1001 to the contrary, the zoning board of appeals may, upon written request for variance, permit the expansion, extension, enlargement, replacement, or movement of or addition to a non-conforming use or building in accordance with the criteria specified in Town Law 267B.
I guess, so I wonder if it had gone that way, that they said, well, we're building new buildings, so we need to go to the ZBA, where would that have led us?
Well, it would be an area variance, not a use variance. And so, given the criteria that we have here, and the fact that there's no area variance required for, well, let me see, is it a use variance?
I think it is.
It is.
The use of the building. What will be used for? We're talking about the track.
But
Well,
it's
no.
within the existing non-conforming use of the property.
Yeah, the issue is not what the building's used for, but if putting a building is the use variance, is what I'm, but it's really just an area variance.
But if I may, is it really an area variance? Because my understanding is the building is all within setbacks. So it doesn't seem to me that would be an area variance. If anything, it would seem maybe it's a use variance, but it's for the use of the sportsman's club.
Right.
So,
But it says.
so perhaps a new building, when placed within the proper setbacks, if the building is for the use of a sportsman's club, which has been the use of this property, then perhaps that is allowable, you know, by the code. Just
Right.
like
So we can.
shooting trap in one area is allowable by the code,
Right.
or in a new area.
If you take a look at page 6, you'll see the 2013 zoning interpretation addresses the same issue, and it was determined that it was a pre-existing non-conforming use and it was all right to expand.
This is page 6 of Lynn's determination.
Yes. January 22nd, 2019.
Which would fall under 1001.2,
Right.
not requiring any ZBA input,
Right.
as long as it met setback.
It doesn't seem to have a limit of the number of buildings on the property.
Not as long as they meet the
As long as
setback
they meet
requirements.
this.
So the second part of
The second part of expansion,
yeah, the second part of, just getting the numbers right, of the Appellant's paragraph 3B. They're saying that in his zoning interpretation and determination letter of October 12th, states that the trap ranges will not be expanded since the trap ranges are being traded for the rifle ranges and will take up less land area than the current trap ranges. And they again quote 1001.1, the non-conforming use of land may not be expanded or extended so as to occupy a greater area of land unless a variance therefore has been granted.
The logic behind this, as you can turn to the next page of the appellant's document, is they're adding the new areas, the new trap ranges to the existing, and not, you know, moving. So in that case, the math says yes, but according to Lynn's math, they're occupying a smaller area. That the table 1 on page 7
Right, I got it.
adds those together.
And I'll add it, I think the rationale behind that, you'll find on page 6, where their focus is on the deposition of lead shot.
Yeah.
So you have lead shot remaining in the current wetland area where they've been doing the trap shooting, and now you're going to be relocating, and there'll be further deposition of lead shot in the new trap area.
But the use doesn't distinguish that. It says that they're using all of this area, and yes, some of it's got lead shot in it, and others don't. They're moving things around that are the same use within the same area. They're adding lead to possibly a new spot, but it's not an additional area. It's all within the original.
but the amount of lead increases. The
But
total-
I can't bring that back to the zoning code and
Right.
The light doesn't get addressed in the zoning.
It doesn't get addressed.
And also,
Issue.
keep in mind that there is an EPA consent order that has them in the new areas, having a lead retrieval plan that is in place for the new areas. Now, the EPA made a decision to keep the lead in the current wetland area. Again, that's in the jurisdiction of EPA. That's their decision that remained. And it was their decision to review and approve this lead retrieval plan that the gun club will be under, that would cover the new area.
Well, I'd like to read this letter from the EPA to the gun club. See what we got here. Paper to keep me busy. It's in the Barclay Damon,
Right.
one of them that they gave us. There's the letter from the EPA to the gun club.
Do you want?
You got it?
Yes.
Thanks. I have it. Just get it later. Thank you. No, it's not in this one, no. You have a copy, you read it to us last time you were here.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything with me.
Are you referring to the one that has Buster in it?
Yes, this is it. I got
Got
it.
it?
The purpose of the EPA's order was to require the club to cease shooting lead into wetlands and waterways where lead reclamation would be difficult, if not impossible. The relocation of the trap pistol and rifle ranges appear to meet that requirement. As to whether the relocation meets all of the local, state, or federal requirements, it is the club's responsibility to ensure their actions are in compliance with those requirements. Per paragraph 34 of our order, the order is not to be construed as a permit, nor does it relieve the club from meeting any applicable local, state, or federal laws. In fact, paragraph 45 of the order states that the club shall undertake all activities required by this order in accordance with the requirements of all applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations. EPA reviewed the environmental stewardship plan attached and found it comported with the EPA's guidance on best management practices for lead and outdoor shooting ranges. Nevertheless, it is the club's responsibility to ensure its actions do not violate any federal, state, or local laws. Regarding the neighbors' concerns, we leave it to the town if it deems it appropriate to consider whether runoff might affect the garden and whether groundwater flow might affect the well. However, in its environmental stewardship plan, the club stated its intent to address erosion and runoff and to control pH levels to minimize leaching of lead. The homeowners may also wish to periodically test the water from the well. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Ed Guster, who is environmental scientist at the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So I feel as far as the gun club is concerned, they've complied with the EPA determination, but the EPA has left up some local determination. I don't say they've given it to us, but it's certainly something we should think of.
It seems to me that the EPA might have been referring to the need for a speedies permit, the possible need for a speedies permit for complying with local zoning code, setback, all that. Certainly, they had to add a statement that the Drive Gun Club couldn't run afoul of local law.
Right. We're just talking this over, so. So.
Do you have a question for the gun club regarding the EPA order or email?
I think you've already answered the fact that you've complied with the EPA, right?
That is correct.
So there's nothing, do you want to add anything at this point?
No, sir, not at this point. Thank you.
So I guess one of the things that we have to think about is whether or not the expansion, whether or not the movement of the track field is an expansion, which is, this is from section 3, part B of the appeal.
Didn't we cover that, Herb?
Yeah, I think we did. So then this is section 3, Article 3, section C of the appeal. Looking at Article 10, Law 1002.0, enlargement or movement. In his zoning interpretation and determination letter of October 12th, the code enforcement officer states that the club is not proposing to expand, enlarge, or replace anything. See attachment 21. The CEO states that it is his opinion that the club is just swapping range locations and thus using the same lands.
I think this is a subject to the logic in the first section, or the previous section B, that they're trying to make the case that the gun club's expanding its operation or its land area. And I think we've discussed that already under Part B. Right?
But they're still utilizing the same space and area that they've been utilizing.
Right. It's a subset of B.
Right.
This one comes to the question of permission to alter or enlarge, and the key point that I think you brought up at the last meeting was the movement or addition to a non-conforming use. But if you're still looking at the use as outdoor shooting, then they're not adding any addition to.
Kind of makes it.
The question to me is the thought around the movement of. And I think we discussed this last time, or it came up during the public hearing aspect of they're not moving it to across the road where they haven't used before, or up in the wooded area that they haven't used before.
They're in the same space.
They're in the same space that they have been utilizing for different things over the years. So kind of
Types of shooting have been present in that space for a long time.
And the building has been there.
yeah. So the only question to me that was in addition to was the warming house. It's not in the same space that it was in, but it's still in the same area that they've been utilizing. So that makes that question different.
So even though the trap ranges are overlapping and taking over a larger space overall than the pistol and rifle ranges, it's still the same use essentially under the regulations that we have.
The pistol and rifle ranges, we haven't really talked about here. And I'd like to know if those have been decided in terms of where their location is going to be.
They're on the map.
Yes, they are listed on the maps.
They're
Scott,
up
can
here.
you point them out?
They're on the original draft deed. Right there.
Those are definite?
Yes.
When Pete and I visited down there, I was under the impression that that wasn't completely decided yet because of the space and the distance that you need to function for those two activities.
The only thing we were talking about, I think that day, was talking about our turkey shoot and how we were gonna perform the future of that.
Yeah. Because you couldn't get back far enough.
Well, no, we still got our yardage, but we just want to be able to make sure we can get the target or the bulls to go in the right spot into that bull traps.
And they have to be in front of the, you have a berm there and you
You
have,
burn some kind of
Wetland.
bull trap of some sort.
so you still believe they're gonna be located right where they are?
Right where they're, yes,
On
yes.
Sir, could you just identify yourself for purposes of the record?
I'm Scott Hicks.
And you're a representative of the gun club?
Yes. Wasn't vice president, and I was just the board of directors.
Thank you.
Okay. Section E of paragraph 3. Can we go to that? We've done with D.
Well, D, we didn't cover D, but it seems like yet another subset of B, where the basic assumption is that,
Yeah, I guess.
change in use.
yeah.
Well, I read it, and I think that swapping range locations and thus using the same lands. They,
Because the terminology of shooting is not defined more specifically.
the town law defines the area as for a gun club for shooting. It doesn't say anything about what type. So section E, in his zoning interpretation, the CEO fails to mention or address Article 10, 1004. It says any damage non-conforming land or building that is determined to be unsafe or hazard to public health or safety shall be subject to all other regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings.
So in this, my understanding is that the EPA has declared damaged lands there. Is that correct? Yes.
Of course, yes.
In terms of the current lead, and then the recommendation is that it not be disturbed, which would make it worse, right?
I'm sure that term carries some baggage with it, damaged land.
Yeah.
Has it been declared as such?
Abandoned, I'm not quite sure. If it, I don't know what the EPA language is on that, so I think we probably should clarify it.
Lynn,
Yeah,
do you have a copy of the EPA letter for the,
I do, it's back in the office.
would you get it for us so I could read it? I'd appreciate it.
Might take a while.
Shuffle through here.
Yeah, I'd like to I think that that's a point that
It
we
is
should
important to
clarify.
clarify that.
Yes.
So that'll be included in consent order.
It may be in
Yes.
there. Let's get the consent.
Chairperson, are you looking for the administrative order on consent?
Yeah, I have a copy of it.
Does it have a copy?
We want to specifically look at the language.
Does it make any specific reference to where the consent order, damaged lands is?
Well, not in this.
It doesn't make a reference to where they have been identified as damaged land.
But they're calling it non-conforming damaged lands that are being
Well,
expanded.
yeah,
So
no.
I want to see
Yeah, there's,
what the,
It's attachment 7.
Yes.
Attachment 7.
okay,
Attachment 7. And then no.
There's a bunch of pages there, which page?
oh,
we just stuck through it and we got attachments. Thank you very much.
It's on page 3, number 24.
Okay, lead shot when it is not reclaimed or recycled may be considered discarded and or abandoned, and may be considered a solid waste which may constitute a hazardous waste as those terms are defined at section 1004, 27, and 5 of the Act 42 USC section 6903, 27 and 5. So it does not specifically use the words damage. But it is considered solid waste.
so that's under findings of fact and conclusions of law. And then the next section of the letter spell determination and then order, which I assume uses the findings of fact and conclusions of law to direct the Rod and Gun Club for a route of compliance, the order. I'm just looking for a paragraph that addresses the existing lead. Let's see.
Continued handling and disposal of the lead shot for 11%
Yeah, but did the EPA require a certain monitoring of the existing lead in the ground in the old as part of this order? Maybe you can help us. Did the EPA stipulate any continued testing or treatment of the ranges that are where there's lead in the ground now?
They're not completely, just other than testing for pH and making sure that, acidity doesn't change.
So where the existing trap ranges are, that you're obliged to do that for the EPA?
Yeah.
And what's the frequency of that?
It was, I can't remember now, but I would guess at least once a year.
Lynn, do you know the frequency of the regulation there?
I do not. What I'm reading on the plan implementation is 2016 survey permits, decommission all field, install shot full vegetation, apply lime if needed.
That's for the, I believe that's for the new location.
I don't know.
That is for existing.
Existing also?
That's all I see.
I guess it hinges on this statement from Local Law 1, 2015, Article 10-1004 on page 11 of the appellant's document. Quote, any damaged non-conforming land or building that is determined to be unsafe or a hazard to public health or safety shall be subject to all other regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings. Well, it seems like a declaration would need to be made that either it's unsafe, you have a building that's leaning into the road and may fall, as an example, or a hazard to public health or safety. That sounds like an official declaration that needs to be, would be made, right?
Well, I think we were reviewing this in reference to the EPA letter, and is that right, Herb? It was in conjunction with that?
Well,
EPA letter and the
EPA
recommendation about
Right, the thing
town.
that started us down this was the code of damaged lands here. We were trying to find the EPA called that damaged lands.
The definition, but prior to that, we were also talking about the town's regulations around all of this.
Yes.
That term damaged lands may just be the appellant's own language.
Yes.
Is it referring to something that's defined?
That's the question they're asking.
Yeah.
It's in the town law.
It's in the town
The
law, it's in
term
quotes.
damaged lands is defined?
Anything that is in quotes in our appeal is taken directly.
No, I'm not looking at the section in quotes, I'm looking at the paragraph below it.
Okay.
It says damaged lands.
It's in large letters, damaged lands.
Yeah, but if you look above, the word damage, non-conforming use is used in the town law. It is in quotes, and then we also use the word damaged.
So damaged lands.
And it says damaged land or building, and because we use the same language as the law throughout the entire appeal.
I see.
So it's not to,
Okay.
substitute
I
words.
see it.
But so that particular land has not been labeled as damaged by any authority at this point.
Well, why would EPA ask them to move if they weren't damaging the land where they are at with lead going into the creek? So, I mean, they've been asked to move the definition of creek.
I think they were asked to cease use.
Yeah, they were asked to cease use in March.
I'm not sure where this is going. I mean, as far as, if you read on in the opponent's letter, what? It goes into best practices.
So my question here is, what can we expect from the town in terms of follow through if this indeed is a hazard, which it looks like it is, what's been declared for the gun club to cease use. So it would follow then what would we expect from the town in terms of that?
And could we make a recommendation?
And ultimately, the appellant's point, you'll find at the end, it says the LRGC's proposal does not mention this requirement about repair of the damaged building or land under 1004. Does not mention this requirement, nor does the CEO Lynn Day's determination reflect this requirement. Thus, the application was incomplete. So they're basically arguing that, we'll use the term right now for short, damaged lands, that these damaged lands were not part of the consideration of the application for the building permit, and it should have been.
I actually did respond to that. I
Okay.
did send something in after that was brought up at the first meeting. And my response was, this is not applicable, this has not been determined, and this is an EPA Rod and Gun Club issue with the consent order.
It sounds to me like though it's going back and forth between the EPA and the town, if we're reading what the EPA's letter stated. So I think there is an expectation, from me at least, that the town have say in this.
And Lynn is quoting from his response of January 22nd, 2019.
But January 22nd or February 12th?
January 22nd,
22nd.
page 6.
Maureen, how are you getting that the town is part of this?
Well, I'm referring to the letter from Mr. Custer leaving some of the decision up to the town in terms of how this is handled. The hazardous waste part. So it hasn't been determined, it sounds like.
They
I'm
don't.
looking for something.
And we don't have anything in our code that addresses that.
They would have to write
They have to
law.
write something
or-
about it.
Yeah.
This is part of what we can recommend. We don't seem to have a regulation around this. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm looking at this as federal government, so EPA, so I'm not gonna step on the federal government's toes.
And yet they're referring it back.
They're saying in their letter that we have some kind of,
We have some kind of regulation or control over it according to this.
Well, we
That
have
blanket
to,
statement
that
thing?
we
The
can.
environmental stewardship
Right.
plan.
we have
We
to
have
have regulations.
We have to address the erosion and runoff. Whether the runoff might affect the garden, whether groundwater flow might affect the well, that's the town to determine the master and swift and strong event, right? So Scott or whoever from the RUD, I guess I have a question of, you had the option to no longer use lead. I mean, they're basically coming out and permanently prohibiting shooting activities at the club that used lead ammunition. Why is that not being addressed as a viable option
It was addressed in the course of negotiations with EPA,
with EPA?
and there are downsides to that were addressed, and basically the EPA gave us a menu of options to select. And one of them was the relocation of the ranges to an area that could be reclaimed, that was out of the stream area, in the floodplain. And that's the one the club chose. And that's why EPA agreed to go forward with the order and execute it, and on we go. But in the EPA's language that you mentioned, that says this does not constitute a permit and locals have jurisdiction, EPA doesn't try to absolve itself of all responsibility or push everything onto the locals in terms of that. If you have building permit requirements, if you have floodplain requirements, SWIP or speedies requirements, those are all state and local based. And EPA says, you take care of those on your own. We're not giving you a dispensation that you're free from all those. And that's what the club did. It secured the consent order with EPA for the selected option, and now it's simply going through the local permitting process, in this case a building permit, to finalize the details of the actual swap of the ranges.
So whose responsibility is it to monitor the existing lead in the soil in the old ranges to make sure that it's in its least hazardous state? In other words, right, pH, is that the Rod and Gun Club's responsibility? With
According to
oversight?
the order, the club has responsibility to monitor the pH in the soil on an ongoing basis to ensure that there are no spikes or something that need to be brought to the attention of regulators.
And that is between the Rod and Gun Club and the EPA?
That's a condition of the order, yes.
The town was made lead agency by the EPA for secret.
If the town wants to make a stronger law, regulation, what have you, they can do that.
Even affecting the non-conforming use.
And retroactively,
Right.
writing a law to a specific case. In other words, this is going on, we're going to write a law to address it.
It can't go back. It can't be retro.
Isn't that what?
You can, if there's a broad law that the state sets down, if a municipality wants to make it stronger, they can do that, and that will be the law.
And it might, depending on whether or not whatever the law is, what it touches on, is considered to be preempted by either the state or federal government. So it's very possible, but there could be some limitations to that. And it's hard to discuss, and frankly, now we start to get a little bit of feel of what we're here for tonight, and that could be a evening's presentation on its own.
We're getting sidelined.
Yeah.
But we can make that recommendation.
Certainly, and I guess I point out under 1004, it does use the word may be restored to a safe and sanitary condition. It doesn't use the word shall for some reason. It says maybe. And then later on, it talks about subject to all the regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings. And we can, prior to any final decisions made by this board, we can follow up on other sections of the code that may address unsafe buildings and whether or not that also includes unsafe lands, or if it in fact has been restricted to simply unsafe buildings.
Well, it seems that the intention is to include land, because the second sentence said 1,480. Is any damaged non-conforming land or building that is determined to be unsafe or a hazard to public health or safety shall be subject to all other regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings.
So it includes land.
Which would include, seems to me.
But we don't know what all other regulations of the town related to unsafe buildings is.
It is not, as we say here, at this
Right.
moment.
But it would be nice to know that.
We can follow up
Okay.
and help guide you where to go with that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're, at section F now. Are we?
We did E.
We're at F. Article 10, 1007, abandonment. Abandonment or discontinuance, except for agricultural uses which are exempt from the provision of this section. Abandonment or discontinuance of any non-conforming use for a period of 12 months or more shall terminate such non-conforming use of the structure or premises. Any subsequent use of building or premises shall be in conformance with the provisions of the ordinance. So I think that that's, there's more, but I think that's the important part.
So the order from the EPA ceasing shooting on that land applies to this, is that correct?
Well, they're saying that it does. I guess that's for us to try to decide.
So my one question here is about the period of time, the 12 months of use here, or disuse, I guess, is what we're looking at. And when the EPA's consent order was effective was maybe October 2016. And then the appellants, I believe, have a list of people who, or times, I think it was. I have this back in my notes somewhere, a couple of pages of when shooting was actually taking place during that period of time. And I don't know.
But again, they're slicing and dicing the property into little pieces. The Rod and Gun Club hasn't abandoned the use of its property, which I think that this applies to. It's just stopping depositing lead in one area. They're not, it's considered on a use basis, not this
Not a
little piece
portion?
here, this little, well, that's the way I read it.
And I'm reading it differently.
Yeah.
I'm reading it as a portion because that's what the cease order related to. And what I
It's,
Can I clarify a
Yes,
point?
go ahead.
That the EPA is one I sent, it's in my 3-pager that I sent last week. But the EPA says that when you do not periodically clean up the lead, which they haven't done in 63 years, it is considered abandoned and now a hazardous waste. So it currently exists as a hazardous waste.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say the EPA states its own positions in its own correspondence, and I object to any characterization of what the EPA calls hazardous waste or disposal or abandonment or anything like that. I think you need to refer to the EPA documents and to the law of the land and not what someone chooses to characterize it as.
Point taken. So if you could provide us with,
I quoted that
okay.
in my comments.
It's been submitted. she submitted it, she submitted it, well.
Well, I guess we would need, sure we can look up the, the document that it comes from. You can provide us with
We
that.
still, though, I mean, we're equivocating local law here in 1007 with something that the EPA is requiring and saying the two
Right.
marry. And I think that's a jump.
Well, the other issue we have is that the EPA has made a determination about the property, which on one level is good, and on the other level, the applicant seems to be finding fault with. So, is that a correct? Is that a correct statement? That on one hand, you're invoking the EPA, and on the other hand, you're finding fault with what they did.
I was quoting EPA law in terms of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and the Clean Water Act, which they are charged with enforcing in our country. And I was quoting the section where they talked about lead will be considered a hazardous waste if it is abandoned, and it will be considered abandoned if it is not periodically cleaned up.
But you also have an order from EPA that allows, in this particular area, for that lead to remain.
And we protested with the EPA and their attorneys that he was mistaken. He tried to say that all the lead was in the wetland, and clearly was not all shot into the wetland over the last 63 years. But a lot of it has been aimed across the creek and into the stream bed and the stream banks. So, again, Mr. Guster did not do such a great job.
So I guess my point is, can you call it abandoned if EPA has directed for that material to remain in place?
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, the EPA's use of the word abandonment is not the same as the town code's use of the word abandonment. It's not meant in the same context. I think, Mr. Larson, you said, you look at the big picture, has the use of it on the property been abandoned? No, it hasn't. It's a shooting club, it's always been a shooting club, it remains a shooting club. That's the use. Where the use occurs on the property is not the nature, it's not the same as the use itself. And abandonment in this case, for purposes of EPA's federal laws, is defined quite differently than abandonment of a non-conforming use for the town's laws in Article 10.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My take on that is if they did walk away from this piece of property and wanted to come back 2 years later and start,
They would not be able to.
they would not be able to. Right. They abandoned it. Right.
And this, I think, is definitely an EPA concern and should be referred to them. And so we can move on.
Okay, so we're done with section F, and we're on to section 4. So section 3F, we're done, and so we're on page 14, section 4. Duties not performed under town law, stormwater erosion control.
So,
We have
Chairman,
an issue here.
we have a procedural issue I'd like to just bring up. Under local law number 6 for stormwater and erosion control, there is a specified 10-day, if you will, statute of limitations for someone to bring an appeal of a decision made under that local law. So that decision would have been made in October, and this appeal was not taken until December 10th. So more than 10 days, certainly more than 10 days have gone by.
So it's a
So-
non-issue at this point.
A decision can be made by the board not to address this issue because the time period has lapsed to bring the appeal. Just as to local law number 6, stormwater management issues.
Lynn, I don't want to dwell on this. When, you must have a lot of projects come through that require a speedies permit, right? I mean, if you have a large development,
Yeah, most of the subdivisions and big site plans.
does the town, as a matter of course, do you go before the town board and get their approval to engage an engineer to review these? Is that typical?
It's in the law, but what we do, and we've done this for the 18 years I've been there, is we either go to our department head, or in this case, our department head was the town supervisor, and I went and asked him if I could send this to T.G. Miller. I have never gone to the town board to ask their permission. If we don't get a developer's agreement, we still get the $350 fee, and then that's applied towards that, but I had the town supervisor's permission as our department head also.
Okay.
To go forward, so I feel that I covered the base that I needed to by going through the town supervisor.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Could you define that in acronym, SPEEDIES, please? I don't know if everybody else here knows it or not.
It's the state pollution, SPD discharge elimination system permit. I would have to break that down, okay?
Just one, you know, I don't know if anybody else knows
It
it,
covers
but
the
I knew it was a
permitting
permit.
of wastewaters and stormwaters. Most recently, some years ago, they pulled the stormwater management into the SPEEDs, the state pollution elimination system.
Well, I guess we're gonna pass by section 4, because it's out of our consideration at this point. And section 5.
This is the segmentation one, is that right?
No, section 5 is
Floodplains. and-
floodplains.
Um,
And it's they're saying the SWPP failed to follow procedures. But this is not an issue with the SWPP, it's an issue with the fact that the SWPP was unlawful and would require FEMCO to submit a request for variance. So that's not challenging the SWPP, that's challenging the procedure that led to it. Is that correct?
And the inclusion of the portion of the property where the shooting is, the trap rangers are focused on,
So the
the
new
hillside.
ranges are within the FEMA classified 100-year floodplain. This is the FEMA firm
Right.
designation.
Right.
And we had a response from Tim Buell on that issue.
It's in the Damon, it's in the most recent letter.
It was the engineer who stamped the drawn. I can't find it.
It's attached to the most recent letter from the attorney.
I have one.
It's Exhibit B of my February 12th letter.
I was thinking of the letter. Yeah. This one.
Yeah. So the group, February 12th, 2019.
Yeah, I have it, so I don't have it.
Anybody need a copy?
Need a copy or?
Got it.
Yeah, if you want to pass it down, that would be great.
So again, I think right, the issue here is, really comes down to, is the areas of disturbance occurring in a floodplain, 100-year floodplain, or is it also any disturbance occurring in a federal wetland? I think is the question sort of raised by this issue, right?
So the engineer says no and reaffirmed that opinion in his response in early February. And his data came from, I assume, an underlay that the USGS provides. GIS. I guess it's complex because it's standard practice for the engineer to use these underlays that are referenced in the code that are quite old and may be inaccurate, but they're still the reference that the code cites that says use this map as an underlay. Yes, it may be inaccurate, but that's what the code says.
Then the question is now, in our deliberations, can we,
The code says refer to a particular floodplain map when mapping flood, 100-year floodplains. Right?
Right, and they've been updated.
They have been updated, but what does the code reference? I assume Tim Buell used the code, the floodplain map that the code references.
But not the updated version of that reference.
But he used the one that the code requires him to reference.
Because the code hasn't been updated.
But he's obligated as a licensed professional to follow the code, and the code says, use this reference. In my old profession, I ran into it all the time. The codes were outdated, but the code said, use this reference.
In my profession, they don't update the regulations all the time because it's huge. But they come out with white papers and they come out with the knowledge that they are moving in a direction.
The state does that as well with the
before
code.
the FDA rewrites their laws, because it takes them a long time to get that in place. So it's pretty much common practice that professionals use what is going to go into effect. And in this case, going to go into effect in 2020.
Again,
But it has to be codified before.
I think that's what the,
yeah,
We should
we're getting into an open conversation here. We'll ask you a question. Okay? So, Lynn, you have something?
Yes. It's always been, whether it's stormwater, building permits, or anything, zoning interpretations, you have to use official maps. And one that Karen Edelstein used is not going to be official until at least 2022. So you can't use that to determine a building permit for 2018. And I also talked to T.G. Miller, and they totally agreed with me, saying that those FEMA maps are not considered official, and on the following statement labeled on the map, note this work map contains draft flood hazard information for informational purposes, not intended for official use. The official map is the firm map from 1985, whether it's old or not. And then what they normally do when you don't have a flood area is use the Tompkins County GIS mapping to overlay, so it gives you a broader range. But you cannot use, that'd be like me using the building code of 2021 now to issue a building permit.
Well, did Karen use the Tompkins County GIS map?
She used the 2022, if you look in that thing that she just...
I know she did that, but did she also have anything with the Tompkins County?
That I don't know. I looked into, it cannot be the 2022. Tim did use GIS mapping with the 1985.
You have a letter there for us? So now what about, and the town law, get my right page here. Yeah, this is it, okay. Under local law 9, it also calls it the area of special flood hazard are identified and defined on the maps and documents prepared by FEMA, including the NFIP Discovery Map, Seneca Watershed, April 2014.
Right.
So,
I personally, it's very difficult to see if that's part near the gun club, but I will, if you'll allow me to approach the bench, I'll show you where I think it is.
okay.
On the firm map that is approved.
I think we have a blow up.
And if you will, then so this is the discovery map, right, that is referred to in the code. And then this is a blow up of the area. So let me get my bearings. Roughly there is where we believe the gun club property is located. Okay, and then I blew up that area, and that's roughly the area where the gun club is located. So the new track would go over here roughly.
Yes, where you think it is. That's not
No.
where I think it is.
Okay.
Where I think it is, this is where the gun club is, right there's Red Bridge. This flood mapping that is shown here, I believe is this tributary just right up the road. Because this here,
Here's the tributary.
this tributary here is just up the road, and there's a mobile home here, and there's a mobile home here, and there's a house here, and this floods constantly. And this will flood all the way over into this mobile home and this whole area. And that's where I believe that is. It's very difficult to see because they don't have the road in here.
Here, what do they call that? Terrible eyes.
That's a different creek.
Okay.
With-
That's not the tributary.
That's not what I'm doing. That's where it is. That's the problem here because of the scale and everything.
Can we get a higher definition map?
I could check with T.G. Miller to see if they don't have anything that would overlay with that. We're going more precise.
And do you think they would have used that because the town hall or the town surveyors, should they be aware of this?
They may have, I don't know. I would have to.
Lynn, what are the implications? It's hard, I don't understand it. It's got loss data for different zones, but how do you apply it to a project?
Worst case scenario, if that is in fact next to the rod and gun, then they could still build there. They would just have to make sure it doesn't float away. So they would have to build to the standards that are set forth in the floodplain, which is no different than down by the lake, let's say as a Doga Park or anything like that. So that's the way I interpret it.
Well, if the buildings can float away, then the land with the lead in it erode too. Is that correct? I mean, would you think so?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm not on anybody's side, I'm just asking questions. It's not a...
So the area shaded in yellow would in fact designate a floodplain area?
I think that just shows where it would be damaged, so I would, there again, I would have to check on that,
Okay.
into that.
There are two colors there. One shows more damage than the other, right?
Right. The yellow is the lesser,
Lesser. There's
but it's
orange.
also the larger area.
So where can we get more clear information on this?
Well, Lynn said he could get it from here.
I'll see what they
Find
have.
out if they used it. And if not, I'm sure we can find it.
Yeah, I mean, we do need it. I think it's important.
Could I just ask one question about?
Yes.
We don't know what you're pointing at. We're just wondering if you were talking about accessing the 1985 maps that were updated with the 1996 LiDAR data and then geo-referenced so that they were in the right place compared to the old paper maps. So that's, and people are using those even though the official mapping of the floodplain won't be officially adopted until later. People of Lansing are still going to be looking at the lead coming off that hill into that floodplain and being buried, which is what EPA was trying to stop.
I think that the Rod and Gun Club is required to comply with the code as it stands, and the code references the 1985.
I understand that. But we have the larger risk to all the taxpayers from the cleanup eventually, right?
Piece of information.
So that's a question that we'll have to get answered.
Right.
What maps?
We're on to 6.
We're going to find out what maps were actually used and if the NFIP map was used, because that's the one that's in our laws, in our code as the most recent, which is the NFIP of 2014. Okay. Section 6, segmentation. So the question is here whether or not the entire project was considered as a whole or piecemeal, is essentially the issue. And one of the pieces would be, if I'm understanding this correctly, that they looked at the construction phase and the cleanup plan was something separate, shooting at the steep hillside. So. Attaching.
Biggest question, I think, in my mind comes from the language highly erodible here that's used by the appellant. And the hillside where the track shooting is going to take place, and whether that was included in the whole project, and the effect of the shooting onto that hillside. Because we already determined that we can't use this, the stormwater management, that it wasn't objection because it wasn't applied earlier. But this one,
Was that area part of the plan then?
The whole disturbed area was part of the plan.
What about the hillside that's behind it? That's not being disturbed but will be when the lead is reclaimed.
As far as I know, the whole hill that where the lead is going to be will be cleared. That's my understanding.
The applicant's saying it wasn't. Is that correct?
What did you say? Could you speak up?
I said it's my understanding that where the lead will be shot will be cleared. There is clear.
Why does the range is up to specs with DEC. It reaches up the hillside. You know it has specs.
The hill itself is
Yeah,
going to
excuse me, that's, we want
That
to,
should be a question for the
right.
developer about clearing of the hill.
The issue here is that the applicant is saying that a certain portion of the property was not considered in the plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And that
It's not
portion
mentioned.
is the portion that would be essentially the backstop for the
That
shot.
entire hillside, the 3+ acres of hillside.
You want to show, we have the pointer here, can you show us?
Well, I'll just maybe not the better map, but it basically is this area, that area,
Yeah,
up there. That's where
this is the full extension of the range, which goes up this steep hillside, not a gentle slope. And we don't understand how you can reclaim lead from that area, tear down
That's a
trees.
separate issue. The question we have right now is whether that portion of the property was considered in the plan.
If
and
you look
the permit.
at ST-1 dated 10/5/2018, the area she's talking in is written right up there on that map. It says additional tree clearing this area, the lower bank. And it says up where she's pointing, it says top of bank and limit of any shot fall. So the way I'm looking at this is that's all being taken care of. And I know when T.G. Miller looked at it, they looked at the overall plan, that they were the same plan.
I'd like to ask this fellow about clearing, and what the plan is there, if you would.
I'm glad you asked. First of all, with all due respect, we're getting way afield of where we need to be, because the question of segmentation is directly related to seeker. And there is no seeker action here currently being considered by this board. The action to consider, the granting of the building permit, is exempt from seeker review, as Mr. Day pointed out in his review. Also, the changing of the ranges and the non-usage of the stream area and the new usage of this area was covered under an EPA consent order, which is also exempt from seeker under my original submittal. You have to have an action under seeker. As seeker defines the term action, there has to be an action, there has to be some type of a thing that you're giving a discretionary permit to trigger seeker. And without a discretionary permit involved here, and with these two exemptions applicable, seeker doesn't apply. If seeker doesn't apply, there cannot be segmentation. Segmentation is the breaking down of a larger project into discrete areas, each of which is submitted to a separate approval process so as to get under the radar. You approve 10 things, 10 little things instead of one big thing. So you don't get to look at cumulative impacts, you don't get to look at all these other overlapping impacts with it. That's the principle of segmentation. But you don't get to segmentation, you don't even ask if segmentation applies unless seeker first applies. And seeker doesn't apply unless there's an action as defined in seeker that you're currently contemplating. And at this point, given the scope of the club's application, there simply is no discretionary action that we are proposing here that the board has jurisdiction to then apply, aha, that's seeker. That's simply my first point. Second point is, everything that you see on the map is covered, whether it's shooting into the hillside, shooting the rifle and pistol ranges into their own berms or bullet traps. It's all part of the application. So to argue that this part of the application, this top of the hillside is not part of this, that's not a segmentation under seeker or anything else.
Did the SWIP include that area? In other words, I would assume that the SWIP would specify some sort of erosion control when that slope was clear.
The SWIP is triggered by by more than 1 acre of disturbed area. So anything that's disturbed is covered under the SWIP.
That area is not covered under the current SWIP then, because it's not been disturbed yet, is that correct?
If it's not disturbed, then there's no requirement that it be under the SWIP.
When that area does become disturbed in the process of lead reclamation, if it is over 1 acre, then SWIP would kick in at that time. There would need to be a SWIP plan.
I'll defer to Mr. Damon.
If they disturb over 1 acre later on, then yes, they would have to reapply with a SWIP.
Right.
And that would mean another erosion control plan that gets submitted to Mr. Day, that presumably gets reviewed by the engineer again, and approved by the engineer before we can do anything. Remember, you're an MS4 community, which means you have an extra level of scrutiny given to anything like this, above and beyond what most communities are. That MS4 imposes certain responsibilities on the applicant and the landowner, as well as on the municipality, in terms of process and protocols and making sure everything's done right. And I know Mr. Day is well aware of the MS4 requirements, and he follows them, I think, properly in this case, certainly. But that MS4 is a heightened level of scrutiny over all these issues.
So let me just ask a question.
Certainly.
So from just a simple overview, if you knew that you were going to have to excavate that property at some point, why wasn't that part of the original plan? I don't understand the disconnect there. So you're saying that the hillside was not part of the SWIP because it hadn't been excavated?
No, the part of the hillside that was disturbed is part of the SWIP now, today.
But you just said that there's a part of the hillside which is going to be disturbed.
But a SWIP covers present erosion potential for the present project. If we're not disturbing the hillside, that top of the hillside today, then there's the erosive potential of it isn't considered. If and when we make the lead reclamation process and we end up disturbing more than what is currently covered under it, then we simply go back and amend our SWIP and cover that portion. So it's on an as-needed basis only. We're not going to try and speculate on where else it might end up.
Okay.
How far is, for the construction project going on to effectuate under this building permit, how much land clearing, how far up the hill is land going to be cleared?
Possibly from the toe up 20 feet.
20 feet, okay. And that's roughly, and how many feet is it to the peak of the?
300.
Okay. Thank you.
And the width?
And would the range and the width would be as shown on the drawings there with these triangles, if you will?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
He's done to speak a lot, so.
Ms. Nicholson.
I feel like you just proved our argument about segmentation, improper segmentation of the stormwater management plan, that we have this extra duty as an MS4 to do a careful job. In my remarks that I sent to you guys, the calculation showed that 78% of the new trap fields are over those steep slopes, very steep slopes. And according to Managing Lead Shot Acre Range from the state of Massachusetts, most shot lands between 375 feet to 600 feet from a shooter. So it won't just be in the lower flat areas that the shot is going to be landing. It's going to be up into the trees, into that steep forested hillside. And as I detailed in many remarks, and I hope you read them, the process of cleaning up lead requires that you remove all the trees and the soil and sift through it, vacuum it, wash it. There's various processes for reclaiming that lead. And that means that very steep hillside will be exposed to all of our heavy rains, and that means there's going to be erosion events. And that was not covered in this stormwater plan. And by permitting this process, it set in motion an eventual impossibility that they'll apply for another stormwater management plan and not have it granted, because they won't be able to do operating this very bad erosion. And since, in a couple of years, we'll have an official map that proves that already that is all in a floodplain. That means that all of that lead and erosion is going to be in the floodplain, which was what EPA was trying to get us to stop doing in the first place. So there's nuances that have been argued, but in terms of the big picture, what is actually happening in our community is going to be a second hazardous waste site spread throughout the Santa Creek ecosystem.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we're on item number 6, moving toward number 7. Would you like to continue through Article 9 or would you like to adjourn and take up the rest of this at another meeting?
We'll take a vote on this, just a straw poll. Who's for going to the break point that Lily pointed out, or just stopping?
I'm okay to go.
Okay. Pete? Probably take us another 5 or 10 minutes.
Hours? I'm okay to go. Yeah.
So 10 minutes. Okay. So we're not gonna make a vote tonight, because there's a lot of extra information that we have to process. We have to get maps and some things to confirm.
We're going to get through this.
We'll get through it. But the period for public comment is closed. And the only comments, the next time we have a meeting, we'll do the same thing we did tonight, which is...
Mr. Chairperson, will we be privy to the maps that are going to be provided to the ZBA?
Yeah, you get everything that we get is made available by the code office. So there's no documents that aren't public. So, and that's why we're meeting in public. So there's no deliberations, there's no documents, there's nothing that's done. Okay.
7?
For segmentation, or are we waiting for the map?
I think we'll have to look at the map and confirm that. And,
What map do we need to look at? On the second page?
you need to find out where the stormwater map ends, and we're also looking for the new map, the NFIP.
And so those
On
maps
this
are
issue.
related, those maps are related to the floodplain issue. This issue about possible erosion of the hillside through a lead reclamation process really gets to whether or not that's something you should be considering in terms of a non-conforming use question, in my mind, okay? And whether or not perhaps that's part of, is this an expansion of a non-conforming use because of the impact that's being made to that hillside? perhaps is an appropriate way to think about this. I agree with counsel for the gun club that segmentation is typically used, and as they're quoted actually in these papers, under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That is not applicable here because the issuance of the building permit was in fact a ministerial act, and this decision-making, this determination you are now making about the code enforcement office, responding to this appellant's appeal of the zoning code enforcement officer's decision is also a type 2 action under seeker. So the State Environmental Quality Review Act for seeker does not apply directly to this proceeding. But the question, that doesn't mean you can't consider, if you so choose, the issues of impacts to that hillside and whether that, and how that might fold into your decision-making about a non-conforming use.
So my understanding is one of the arguments that it would not be included in the original work was because that you don't know the extent of the cleanup until the area is tested. So yes, the engineer on the plan used probably the same template for how far lead can travel as he would if it were on completely flat ground. But here you're shooting against a hill. And you aren't shooting like this. You're shooting down like this. So it may be that the lead goes up the hill all the way. It may be that the lead is only in the bottom of the hill. But you don't know until you go and test it how much needs to be removed. And you can't design a stormwater remediation plan until the extents are known. So I'm not sure how you could submit that area as part of the original project. I hear it characterized a lot that they're going to remove all the trees from the whole hillside, but that seems pretty extreme to me based on just what I know about shooting. I mean, you don't shoot a clay pigeon like this at maximum arc, you shoot it lower. So I don't know if the gun club, I mean, nobody's ever spoke to this, and I'd like to hear, is this correct, or?
Well, in terms of your description of clay pigeon shooting, it is exactly correct. You don't shoot it up in the air, you shoot it on a plane as it's leaving traffic. So that means that the trajectory of lead shot is not at this angle, but it's out at this angle. And that's one of the reasons why there's a decrease in the overall area of this trap shooting use, because you're shooting to the side of a hill, which attenuates the travel of the shot. So the shot can't travel as far. It stays embedded in the hillside, in the bottom quarter of the hillside, bottom 20 feet of the hillside, maybe less. So we're not talking about denuding an entire 300-foot slope, by no means, because that's just not, one, not feasible, one, it's not necessary, and it's something that no one's ever even conceived of. So if you're talking about simply looking at, well, what do we design a stormwater plan about? I think you phrased it exactly correct. You have to know what area you're looking at and the level of tree removal, the level of disturbance of that land. You have to be able to plan that ahead, and you won't know until you do testing as to what is required to be removed. Because just because a piece of ground has one bit of lead shot in it, that doesn't mean it's going to be removed. There are concentrations of lead shot that meet the requirements for removal. And if you don't fall within that concentration, EPA says don't touch it. One of the reasons why EPA says don't touch the stream is you'll do more damage disturbing it than you would in terms of net cleaning it up. So leave the stuff there in place because that's net positive for the environment as opposed to disturbing, ripping up that whole area. Same thing with the hillside, is you don't strip away the entire hillside, you test to find out what the concentrations are, then determine a pattern for what needs to be cleaned up, and then you design around that. But we won't know that for another 4 or 5 years.
So I guess it would be reassuring to know that there are ways to stabilize a hillside at this slope when excavation happens. I don't know what percentage slope it is. I've heard 30%. It's steep.
It's 30 to 65% slopes.
It's steep.
Doesn't matter the percentage, any hill can be stabilized, depending upon the tactics used. But it's an engineering,
There's an engineering
solution rather than a regulatory
And
solution.
Speedies will require that engineering solution to be implemented to stabilize that hillside.
Speedies, the goal of Speedies and SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, is all geared around preventing the contamination of stormwater that flows into a water source. So whatever that is, you have to determine what the concentrations are, what the potential sources might be, before you then adopt a plan or design a plan under SWIP to be able to control that, to make sure it gets directed to an area where it can be trapped, where it can be detained, where it can be prevented from flowing into an area where it can be exposed to flow downstream.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Because I don't have it in my paper, but do we have in the record the entire environmental stewardship plan? At least in my copy, I just have a cover sheet. And if so, to be sure we have it in the record, you may want to request from the Gun Club a complete copy of the environmental stewardship plan.
It was not part of my material, my submittal materials here now.
So,
No, they didn't. When we went to visit, I was under the understanding that the gun club had not gotten the specifications. They didn't have every detail. They had a general sense of what they were expected to do, but not the details.
And I quoted that in the comment that I put, sent to you. It's like 2 lines. Very vague.
So we need the details, I think. We should have.
We can provide you what EPA has provided was.
yeah, well, okay, so it's my understanding though that as part of the order, EPA approved an environmental stewardship plan. We'd like to have
Copy of the plan.
a copy of that plan, whether it's 2 sentences or it's something more than
Kind of like the best management practices.
that. Again, I think they it appeared to me they specified a specific environmental stewardship plan.
Well, they said they reviewed one.
Yes, but we'd like to see
We can
a copy of that.
Right. Yes. Okay, any other questions from you right now?
No, sir, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah, I think we're at 7, isn't it? Doing is using the appeal as sort of a guide to go through the reasoning. And try to find out what it is we don't know, and what it is we need to know to be able to make a decision.
So in the
Really
matter
happy
of,
to gather some stuff.
so in the matter of segmentation, we're going to review more information at our next meeting.
And we'll also have the other maps that we're looking for, the NFIB map, and the, find out what overlays TG Miller used. Thank you all for sitting through this. I know it was really exciting, but I need a motion to table and continue the closed session.
Mr. Chair, what's the next meeting?
We're not sure yet. We've got to work our schedules. We also have a full schedule already for our next month's meeting, so we're trying to find time in between now and then. So I would like it to be 2 weeks from tonight, and if we can do that, we have to get a notice in the paper, because it's got to be in 10 days before the meeting. So, but our staff has to have a chance to meet.
Actually, do we have to put a notice in, seeing as the public hearing portion is closed? We don't-
I think, I would recommend we do.
Okay, okay.
I always like to be cautious of
Yeah,
this.
so-
Sir, we're not taking any public comments.
So we have to close the meeting.
So I need a motion to table the closed session until the next meeting.
That's so moved.
This is like playing Jeopardy.
Do we have